It's been a while in the making, but the Wealth Tracker version 2.0 is finally ready to share with you guys. Now, I've listened to your feedback and I've been using the original spreadsheet myself for some time now. And in this new version, we've made some enhancements, which I think you're gonna like. Now, if you'd like to download a copy of this spreadsheet, then it is free to download. There's no strings attached. You don't even need to put your email address or anything in. Simply go to my website. The link will be in the description box below, and there's a little download button. But I've got the spreadsheet up in front of me on my computer. So let's dive in, and I'm gonna show you how it works. The first part of the spreadsheet I want to run you through is this budget tab. And this is basically where you put in all of your income and all of your expenses. Now you'll notice I've pre-filled some information in here. Now these numbers are just made up for illustrative purposes, so don't pay too close for attention to them. But you'll notice as we go from left to right, you've got the different months. So you've got everywhere from January all the way through to December. And under each month, you've got planned and you've got actual. The idea behind this is that there's a big difference between making a budget and actually sticking to a budget. Anybody can make a budget, but if you're serious and intentional about improving your financial situation, then you need to be able to stick to that budget and hold yourself accountable. And that's why we've got the plan columns and the actual column. So the plan column lets you input what you plan to earn and what you plan to spend each month, and this is forward looking. And the actual column allows you to put down what you actually earn and what you actually spent during the month. And this is backwards looking. By doing both columns, you're gonna be setting yourself targets and then looking back to see if you've achieved those targets each month, which helps massively from an accountability perspective. So one of the improvements that we've made to this Wealth Tracker version 2.0 is we've introduced columns C and D at the start of the spreadsheet here. Now, what these columns do is they allow you to easily input information into the plan column of your budget. So rather than going through every single month and inputting your planned expenditure, if it's something consistent, you can do it at the start here. So for instance, you might have strata fees and they might be $4,000 per annum. So what it's gonna do is it puts it in each single month, and if it's annual, it's gonna divide it by 12, and you can drop this down and change it to a monthly expense, fortnightly expense, weekly, and daily. Now, if for some reason there's gonna be a higher or a lower month, well then you can also manually overwrite what you've put in at the start. So for instance, in March, maybe for some reason your strata is $500. So you can overwrite that. Now, if you go back and you again overwrite it in column C, it's gonna overwrite what you put in manually. So it reverts back to whichever one was put in last. You'll also notice in the spreadsheet that there's these little blue ticks and these red crosses. Now, what they outline is if you have spent under or over budget for that item. So for instance, here we got electricity and gas. We plan to spend $166.67 and we actually spent $200. So we get a little cross. But if gas for that month was $150, then it's gonna change into a tick because it's below the planned expenditure. If it's exactly equal to your planned expenditure, you get nothing. This is just a nice little visual representation to help you see where you're spending more than you thought and where you're spending less than you thought. So the list of expenses that you've got access to is quite comprehensive, and we've broken it down into subcategories so you can really track where your expenditure is going. And one of the improvements that we've made to this version of the Wealth Tracker is that all of these titles or headings are now editable. So for instance, you might not have children, but you do have dogs. So you can change this to dogs and you can change this to food, and you can really personalize it to suit your situation. At the end of the 12 months, everything gets tallied up into this annual column. So you've got your annual planned expenditure and you've got your annual actual expenditure. Also, at the bottom of each month, you've got your net cash flow. So your net cash flow is your income minus your expenses, and you've obviously got it for plan and actual as well. Now, it's important to track your net cash flow to make sure that you're not spending more than you're earning. So for instance, in this month, let's say you had a big expense you'll see that that goes negative, which means that you've got a negative net cash flow. The reason why I wanted to highlight this is because it's those negative months that really detract from your net asset position. Because if you've got negative cash flow, that negative number needs to be funded somehow. And you can either fund it from savings, or even worse, you have to fund it using debt, things like credit cards. So it's important that when you're going through this, you don't have too many negative months. And if you do, you need to go back and visit what's the problem. And am I spending too much, or do I need to earn more? Hopefully you don't have too many negative months and they are all nice and positive, which brings me on to our next tab, which is the net asset position. And this is where you track your assets and your liabilities to work out what your net asset position is. I personally track the net asset position for all of my clients because it's an extremely valuable piece of information. And the reason is because it's your net assets that are your true measure of wealth. It's your net assets that you can use to earn passive income to replace your earned income, so you eventually don't need to work, or you work by choice and not obligation. So the idea is that you update all of your assets and all of your liabilities every single month so you can track that net asset position. Now with assets, you'll notice I've only included financial assets. I haven't included things like lifestyle assets, so say cars and jewelry, because for me, an asset needs to have the ability to either produce income or increase in value over time, or ideally both, and lifestyle assets typically don't tick that box. You also have your liabilities. So liabilities is any outstanding debts or things like buy now, pay later. So yes, I do consider buy now, pay later a debt because you're receiving something in advance for paying for it. So that is essentially a liability. Now, one improvement that we've made in this spreadsheet is that you can now edit all of these subheadings. And so you can basically put in gold bar if you have that in an asset. You can put in, let's say you have a holiday loan, you can put that as a debt. But again, it's very personalizable to your situation and you can make it say whatever you want. What you want to see is that every single month your net asset position is improving. Now, if you do have a negative month, then take a minute to sit back and work out why. Was it something that you done, or was it something out of your control? So for instance, did you spend too much and have to take drawdowns from your savings? Or did you have a stock portfolio and the stock market dropped, which is out of your control? Now, what you'll notice, or what you should be seeing, is that there is a similar trend between your budget and your net asset position. If in a month you have surplus cash flow in your budget, that should translate to an increase in your net asset position. If you have a negative month in your budget, that will translate to a reduction in your net asset position. And so this really shows the importance of controlling your cash flow in order to build wealth. You want to build up that net cash flow so you've got surplus in order to be able to buy assets. And after a while, what you're going to start seeing is that in the income side of your budget, there's going to start to have some passive income coming through from those assets that you're purchasing. Then finally, we have the analysis tab. And for all of you people that like pretty pictures, then you might like this one. It's basically a visual representation of the data that we've captured in your budget and in your net asset position. So the first one is your monthly planned expenditure versus your actual expenditure. So what you want to see is the planned is higher than the actual, ideally, which means that you're spending less than you intended to. You've got your net assets versus your liabilities. Again, you want to make sure that you see your assets are greater than your liabilities and the gap between them is growing over time. You've got your net cash flow. So this is how well did you stick to your budget. If the blue line is above the browny gray line, then it means that you're spending below your planned expenditure, which is good. Your net assets, again, this is just a representation of how they're growing over time. And you've got your expense breakdown and your income sources. So your expense breakdown shows you the categories where you're spending the most money, and your income sources shows you the category of what is generating you the most income. But that's it for this video. Again, if you want a copy of the Wealth Tracker version 2.0, then the link to it is in the description box below where you can download it. If you have any improvement suggestions or anything like that, leave me a comment. And if you find this video and this spreadsheet useful, then please give the video a thumbs up. I'll see you guys in the next one.